Thank you. So before we start, I have to inform you that this meeting is being visually and audio recorded for publication on the Thatcham Town Council YouTube channel. And for members, welcome to the members of the public. And just to say, as you can see, you're not visible. If you would like to speak on a particular agenda item, you're welcome to do so, but that would be then recorded. So it may not be necessary. So, welcome to this evening's meeting of Planning and Highways. Firstly, apologies for absence.
Apologies received from Councillor Martin Crop.
Thank you. And declarations of interest.
Yeah, so item number 7, which is the proposal to upgrade a Vodafone radio base station, which you will be aware I work for Vodafone, so I'll have to excuse myself, I think, for that discussion.
And for avoidance of doubt, I have Vodafone shares from my time when I did work for Vodafone. I don't think that is material enough, particularly given the number of people here. I don't think that affects my view, as you will see when we get to that agenda item. So, of course, if there is anything else that crops up as we go through the agenda, let's mention it as we start. Let's go straight on to, if you don't mind, I'd like to propose that we change the order of the agenda. So we take item 9 first, that is public questions. I propose that.
Proposed or seconded.
Okay, thank you, those in favour. Thank you, that's agreed. So agenda item 9, public questions. These relate to 3 questions that we received. It was in fact councillors in Thatcham West Ward, and this is questions relate to that area. So I think there are some bits of it. The clerk has included the whole of the text, but I think some aspects of it are outside our remit, so I suggest we steer away from those. So firstly, cycling on pavements. Can I suggest that we don't discuss the helmets issue because that's outside our remit? But if I just read that out in summary, this is a question about the junction of St John's Road and cyclists on pavement. So I asked the Deputy Clerk if she could show the part of the West Berkshire. This is the West Berkshire online map. If you could zoom in, this is the layer. And I need to go. It's off to the right, I think, what we want. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. No, it's off to the left. Sorry. Next junction. So in fact, they're there. So you can see the two junctions there for St John's Road.
Which one's St John's?
Which one? John's Road is the U-shaped, and I think we're addressing the easterly, the right-hand junction in particular. So the thick lines are the cycle routes as shown on the West Berkshire online map. And if you zoom in even further, and you will see that they continue along the footway, pavement, all the way along. So the first thing I noticed is that the map has not been updated after the addition of the cycle lanes. If you go to the pan over to the east toward Crown Mead, I don't know if the members of the public are aware, but a scheme has been approved but not yet implemented to implement the cycle ways on the carriageway. Basically along the distance that you can see there from the High Street junction to just beyond Beverly Close, and that has been, as far as I'm aware, has been agreed and is funded, but has not yet happened. We're hoping that it will happen soon, or some aspects of it at least, and that will mean that there's an on-road cycle lane or a dedicated cycle lane. It's a mixture of on the footway and on the road. Almost up to St John's Road, and I forgot to check we do have detailed drawings which they were a document for a meeting, so we can make those available to members of the public. But that will have, I think the actual scheme finishes, but there's 2 points there that the the online map, and therefore what I believe to be the official cycle routes that's marked on the map, do not reflect the on-road cycleways, and they're also not signed properly because there should be signage if they're dual pedestrian and cycle. So what I would suggest that we do here, particularly as we've got this scheme, as far as I'm aware, approved, which will happen, is to ask the council to, when they do that, to review the what is designated as a cycle, as a footway suitable for cyclists, because some of them are pretty narrow, and they're not really possible for a bike to pass with speed a pedestrian, as I experienced just a few minutes ago when I went to look at this area before coming into the meeting. So I'll come back to that because there's a second element of that relating to the second item. Can I just, yeah, well, Councillor Crumley.
Thank you, Chair. The members of the public here, they give an indication they come to talk about what they.
Well, they're interested in these items, yes.
They have, right.
Yes, so I think probably.
They propose to let them, are they the complainants?
I don't know, and I don't need to know. They're just interested members of the public.
Right, so it's not proposed to.
I was going to say if they want to. I was going to get that was my introduction to this.
Right.
And I was going to suggest a way forward, and then perhaps if they wanted to intervene at that point rather than coming in. So can I go to the second one about the exit from St John's Road, because the two are very closely linked, which is I think the eastern one here, the one that's closest to the town centre, and the issue here is that because of the way the road curves and the parking, that it's the time that you can see oncoming traffic if you're trying to pull out of that junction is very low because there are cars parked quite close to that junction. And the technical term for the visibility is called a visibility splay, which is basically they calculate the distance. There's a distance that you're supposed to be able to see for as a result, as a function of the speed limit of the time. And certainly, again, I looked from the junction, and certainly I can see over the car, but I can see that if you're sitting at driver height, then the time is very short, looking towards the town centre, if a car is parked close to the area. So what I was going to suggest that as part of the work, or before the work is done on the cycle lane, that the council investigates if the visibility display is sufficient for cars parked at that point. And if not, then they could make appropriate changes to the road markings at the time when they're marking out the new area.
Sounds very sensible, Chairman. Thank you.
So those two things are related. So relating to that cycle scheme, my suggestion is that we write to the council asking them that when they implement the cycle scheme at the same time or before, they do consider what the preferred routes are. And this actually would apply to the whole length of the A4 between the town centre and the Lower Way, effectively, because there are many places where different schemes have been implemented over the years and the signage doesn't link up. So what they call desire lines, which is the route that people would naturally go, don't always tie up with what the signage says.
Sure.
And quite often what's shown marked on the map is not the route that people go. So I think it's about time when they've got implemented that scheme for them to review the whole thing and then decide if there's any signage changes that are necessary and or a modification to the scheme. Councillor Crumley.
Thank you, Chair. I agree that displays should be investigated if there's a problem of vehicles parking too close to the junction, so to affect visibility on exit, then that should be stopped. There are two arms to St John's Road. The A4 is a busy road in both directions. Anybody pulling out seeking to turn right is going to have a problem, and they will have a long wait. And probably nothing that West Berkshire Council can do about that. If I can go to item 1, cycling on the pavements. Wearing my lawyer's hat years ago, Section 72 of the Highways Act 1835 it's illegal to run quite to ride a bicycle on a pavement, but of course nobody seems to take any notice of that, neither police nor cyclists. But it's interesting to note that there has been this prohibition. What is not needed is cyclists on the pavement. They can ride on the road, which is where they belong. And indeed, we have various cycle paths on the roadway going through through Thatcham at the moment. Is there any designated cycle lane on this stretch of the A4 north or south?
No, there isn't.
None at all.
And
Is there proposed to be?
it was due to stop, I think, between Beverly Close and this point. At least the scheme was.
Beverly Close is in the middle coming down,
Yes.
isn't it?
So I think again, that's something we
Well,
can.
what was the reason for that, if I may? Is that because the road was not wide enough? It strikes me as being
I think
quite
it was just
wide at that
the
point.
scheme was basically focused around Crown Mead. And that was how far they had to go to implement the changes for the scheme.
Yeah, but Crown Mead's in a distance of from.
It covers Crown
to
Mead,
exits,
Crown Hill Road. The other point there is, in fact, if people continue to cycle along that road going east, they will go past the bus stop where people will be waiting, and there isn't actually space. If people are waiting, there isn't space for a cut bike to get through at all. And cyclists, as I discovered this evening, don't use lights. They don't seem to use lights nowadays. Councillor Woodens.
I give way.
Okay.
Right, I mean, I don't want to make comment on why people are using pavements, because I don't know the individuals or the route that they're doing, but I can pass a few observations and comments as a cyclist who travels and cycles from Thatcham to Newbury. And I tend to cycle on the side of the road that we're talking about, the St. John's side of the road. And it's really noticeable and quite concerning. And you summarise some of the problems very well. There's a whole series of discontinuities all the way through from Thatcham to Newbury, which makes it nigh on impossible to work out what route you should be going on as a cyclist. And one of the key issues is that area around St. John's, because you're happily cycling along on the road with a solid white line protecting you from the traffic. And it's, there's HGVs, heavy traffic in the morning, and that line then just stops about that point, and you're squeezed into a narrower stretch of road with the traffic islanders and competing with the space with an HGV coming up behind you. And I'm an experienced cyclist, but I'm always conscious and concerned of vehicles coming up behind me, and particularly if they're large vehicles. So I can understand why, particularly if you're a cyclist coming out of some of these roads, you wouldn't have the access of a cycle lane available to you. It wouldn't be obvious, and it would be natural, I think, for people coming out to cycle on the pavement to avoid trying to cross the road, and for their own personal safety. If I can just make another comment, and this will probably get me into trouble, but you mentioned do cyclists use traffic lights? There are occasions, and other countries have a different attitude towards cyclists, and it seems to be more tolerant. But if you're trying to both preserve your own life and avoid putting yourself in a dangerous position, it's safer sometimes to get off the road or skip a light and pull up to the side of the road, rather than waiting in a position where when the traffic starts, you're in a vulnerable position. So as a cyclist, you have to sort of look at self-preservation, and you see the road slightly differently to what's a car user would. And I would sort of just beg for a little bit of tolerance for cyclists, because I cycle because I'm trying to do the right thing to avoid extra car journeys on roads, and I think many cyclists do the same. And I think often we just have to be tolerant to each other. But that particular stretch, just summarise, is pretty treacherous.
And in fact, talking about junctions, Hennick Lane and Park Lane, you reach the junction with a cycle lane and suddenly it disappears.
That's another spot.
Anyway, so
Yes, and I was just going to make a point.
Yes, so Councillor Williams.
Yes, I think for years, I mean, good grief, how many years can you go back when people, when I was at school, we had these lessons at school about how to ride a bike and not ride on pavements and so on, and we warned about the legislation, but there was never any enforcement. And so it continues. There's no beat police, there's no neighbourhood police that actually are out there stopping cyclists using pavements incorrectly. So it's a problem. Who's going to deal with it? I've got no idea. But the other point is, I make deliveries occasionally in St. John's Road, and two occasions recently, I've come out to turn right on the A4. And when I look right, there's a pavement with cyclists. There are cars with a designated half on the road and half on the pavement. Then there's a cycleway. I'm looking at this and think, my gosh, there's a challenge even before I can get out and see if there's anything coming from the right. And if I did, who's coming from the left? It's a nightmare. The whole area needs looking at totally for everybody. Cyclists, pedestrians, cars, lorries, the lot.
So I think I'd like to propose that we invite members of the public to speak at this.
Seconded, Chair.
Be those in favour?
Well, this is just pending.
No, we don't know that. We changed the standing order, so the terminology is new now. So same result.
Catch up.
If you're suspending standing orders, you then can't return to the standing orders.
Absolutely.
I probably was going to reiterate what Councillor Woodham said. The fact that it's preserving the life of the cyclist. I've been a cyclist myself. I know that I used to get off when I crossed the road, like you said. But cyclists nowadays, they just go straight across and they can be on the bonnet of your car before you realise it.
Sure.
So it's signage, I think we need until everywhere has got a cycleway. That's what I think.
Thank you. So if we return back to normal for the moment, or we'll leave, but they can split, leave that open. So for the third point. Sorry, and second member of the public.
I'm here on the same thing. It's the cycling on pavements. I tend to agree with David Lister there. I cycle between. I bought a bike 3 years ago, an electric bike, to get from Thatcham to Newbury. And as you say, that particular stretch is what I would call a very hairy ride. You're riding along quite nicely behind the barriers.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, they're gone. And you've got sort of like a 40-foot juggernaut breathing down your shoulder, and you're thinking, I've got nowhere to go. So self-preservation kicks in, and I've done it myself. You hop onto the pavement. You think, I'm not going to get run over by this fella because I won't be here tomorrow if that happens. So you dart onto the pavement. Whether or not that pavement is designated as half pedestrian, half cyclist, it's not always clear. Equally speaking, taking an aside a different matter, if you go down Lower Way, there's areas that are purely cyclists, and they tend to be littered with pedestrians. So when you think, as a cyclist, you think that's an area there I can scoot down here at a full pelt because there shouldn't be a pedestrian. And the next thing, there's a pedestrian standing. I think, well, I'm going to hit this ball. But so there's two sides to the coin. But most of the reason cyclists are using the pavement is not because they want a flagrant.
Yes.
Basically self-preservation. And I've done the same thing myself with the St John's traffic light situation, where if there's big trucks coming behind you and there's some coming the other way, the easiest way to navigate the crossroads and traffic lights is to get on the pavement, scoot round the corner, cross where it's quiet and come back, and then zip onto the road once you get a little bit of a cycle.
The safest way.
It's the same.
Yes, but it's not strictly legal.
Yeah.
No.
So most of the, you can see here, most of the length of the A4, the footways, the pavements are marked, are designated as cycle lanes as well. So that is permitted. There are some odd, strange bits. There's a bit east of Hennick Lane where there is a sort of old bit of the road beside. The official cycle lane goes through that, and the main footpath is no longer a cycle lane, just for that bit, but there's no signage to tell you that.
Sure.
So I think in summary, what there needs to be is a thorough review of the whole length in the light of the schemes that have been developed. In order that they can work out what are the desire lines and make sure that the desire lines are safe and unsafe bits are signed so that they're they're not used. Incidentally, I think the lower way is in fact, although it might be marked as to give the appearance of being a pure cycle lane, is again a dual use. Not
It's dual use from the signage that I've seen, it's dual use from the primary school to the car park of
right.
Discovery Centre.
Mhm.
You've got an area there where kids come out of school and they can walk along there, and that's dual use up to that junction.
Okay.
Prior to that, top of the hill, it's cycle only, and after that, it's cycle only again, because it's cycle only on the left-hand side, and pedestrian only on the right-hand side.
Right.
So, by the same token, if you're on a bike, you're not supposed to be on the right-hand side, you're only supposed to be on the left,
Yeah. So
vice versa. David, you probably.
I think in summary, we need to add lower ways to the list of things that should be reviewed.
I mean, Chair, I mean, although it's outside of our remit, because I'm going to extend this towards Newbury, but it's important because, you know, we are the two largest towns and we should be connected with a passing cycle lane. And actually, if there is a review by West Berkshire Council, they need to review it from Thatcham all the way into Newbury and vice versa.
Absolutely.
You know, I find it amazing. You're cycling towards Newbury, you've got the Rolls Royce of cycle lanes as you go past the Tesco's.
Yes.
And you know, you got the curve and all the rest. This is lovely. And it kind of just ends at Greg's.
Yes.
and then you're left to sort of navigate Robin Hood roundabout or whatever by yourself. And just say, so that needs to be properly thought through. Where does that go? And what's the point of that part of the road, that cycle lane, that wonderful piece of segment? And then coming from the opposite direction, it's not at all clear when you're going towards Thatcham. If you join where I do, which is a few hundred yards on the A4, so I don't start necessarily from Newbury, but come down from a north access road. It's not at all obvious which side of the road you should be cycling on as a cyclist, because if you cycle on the pavement, as you mentioned, there's some stretches where it looks like it's shared use, but then it disappears, and you're not sure if you're meant to go onto the road or not, or are you meant to cycle across the road and join that the nice deluxe part of the cycle lane, and then cycle on the side part going from west to east. So the whole thing is really confusing, and it's no wonder, to be honest, that people jump onto the pavements where necessary.
Yeah. So in summary then, what I'm proposing is that we ask the Deputy Clerk to write to the Council asking that as part of the implementation of the Crown Mead scheme, or before then, they undertake a review of the whole length to identify what are the desire lines and the appropriate routes, and that they have appropriate markings and signage so that people know what they should be doing.
And Chairman, if I may, following any review, perhaps whoever's responsible for taking the review could come here and just explain what they found and how they're going to go about it. And perhaps local knowledge. I mean, you're a cyclist, obviously, then you're a driver. You know, we've got some expertise in here. We can see whether whatever they come up with makes sense and gets our approval. And that perhaps we can invite the public to listen to whatever the Highways Department, West Berkshire Council come up with.
Okay, so just I take that as a seconding. So in addition to that is that we invite the West Berkshire Council officers to present the results of that to
Because we're looking at getting rid of all the confusion and getting consistency between Thatcham and Newbury, because we're constantly reminded, get out of your cars. But it doesn't seem safe to me to cycle everywhere.
I have to say that when I drive down there, I often wonder if that is deliberately set up as a demo system, demo place, where every option for cycle footway is implemented in the space of 2 miles, so people can compare and contrast them. Anyway, so I think, did you second that in my proposal?
I did, yes.
So as amended by Councillor Woodham's, can you read that out or sorry, paraphrase it?
Paraphrase it.
So we ask the clerk to write to the council to request that as part of the Crown Mead scheme, or before then, they review the cycleway provision both on the pavement and on the carriageway between the town centre and the boundary with Newbury, and then identify the appropriate routes and implement marking and signage for them.
But also,
come and present the results to
also, Chairman, particularly with St John's Road, where you've got terrible blind spots.
And then second part to write to them is to ask them to at the same time review the
Exits.
the visibility displays at the
Yes.
exits,
Yes.
particularly the St John's Road, the eastern exit to St John's Road, but not limited to that.
Bearing in mind, particularly as I said earlier, you've got the pavement, cyclists and pedestrians, then you've got cars half on dedicated parking area, half on the road, half on the pavement. Then you've got a cycleway, then you've got the road, and if you want to turn right, I don't think you should turn right, so go down the road a bit and then come back.
Go around to the roundabout, all the way to the roundabout and turn around.
Anywhere else, it's very difficult.
So thank you. Can I second, can I see a vote those in favour of that proposal? Thank you. Unanimous.
Can we also, Chairman, thank the visitors
So we've got the third point of data that's been raised.
for that particular area?
So we then move on to the third point, which is bins on the pavement or footway, as the technical term is, in St John's Road. I went down there this evening and certainly they are there. I'm not sure if tomorrow's been collection day.
It is election day, but it's there all
Yeah.
the time.
And certainly if they're there, they would cause an obstruction. So do you have that that website, that web page? So I did a bit of research this afternoon and I discovered this web page. Anyway, there is I found a web page on the government website describing what measures are available to address this issue. And I'll see if I can find it well.
What issue will we?
This is people who leave wheelie bins on pavements all week or beyond the time when they needed the collection. Right.
Is it a bit late to find solutions because it's happened?
I know the point is that there is a legal measure. So that's probably it one, yes. Yeah, there we are. So there is government guidance. In fact, it is possible for the council to enforce it and to impose penalties. What that requires is that the council have a policy to enforce. And I was unable to find any such policy on the West Berkshire Council website. So, however, I did find by an internet a Google search that several other councils, even small ones than West Berkshire, do have such policies. And of course, the first step of the policy is to write to the resident concerned, informing them of the legal situation, but they are not permitted to leave them out by law. So anyway, this is the website. If you just scroll the content there, who can issue bid penalties and how to issue them. And my suggestion here is that we write to a different department of West Berkshire Council, very sorry, suggesting that they, inquiring if they do have a policy, and if not, suggest that they implement it, that they do develop one and enforce it where it's causing a nuisance. And I would say actually that looking at the situation on St John's Road, the obstruction is far greater than would be the case for many hedges for which the council does do enforcement.
No.
Can I just say take the council?
Okay, right.
So Councillor Woodland.
Chairman, I'm always in fear, if I was a resident and getting a letter which was full of legal comments and so on, my back might be sort of up, and I would respond more positively perhaps if the council were to write to the residents explaining the situation, and if no one takes any notice, followed by a letter suggesting that there is enforcement.
I have also suggested that perhaps the first step is that, given that the council does provide paper documents to all residents relating to refuse collection periodically, changes of date and so on, that this information could be a bit more prominent. There is a message sort of as an afterthought at the bottom of the most recent one, but it's very soft. So I would suggest that the first step is we suggest that they include a more prominent statement in the next communication that they send to all residents. And of course, letter that they write, the language, they can choose the language to write it in, but,
A gentle encouragement,
Yeah.
initially, I think.
but I think part of it is you really need, in order to encourage people to follow a policy, you need a policy. So if there's a policy, I think it comes under the Environment Act 1990. If there's not a policy, I think you have to rely on the Police Term Clauses Act of 1843.
Well, there we are.
47, sorry. Thank you.
Of course.
Anyway, a long way to go. Councillor Crumley.
Yes, your idea seems a good one, Chairman. Perhaps when you write, or we write to every council, we can refer them to this specific site that you've looked up, because I mean, I didn't know of it, and those in London West Parts Council may be unaware of it as well. I remember the development of the old black horse, the house is a little crammed in there, so it doesn't surprise me at all that that's generated a problem.
I think, if I recall correctly, if you do search on the council's website, it does say that if you're unable to store your bin, then you should contact the council for alternative measures, probably bin black bags. Anyway, so the proposal there, before we do that, return again to the member of the public.
I think this is sort of closing the door after the horse is bolting, because there was a rear access to those properties when it was a pub. But when it's made into houses, for some reason, that access was used in one of the houses. So there's no rear access. There's bin stores at the back, there's cycle stores, but no access to get to them. It's a planning issue, surely. And I feel really sorry for the people that live there.
Well, of course, one of the questions is whether the obstruction was part of the planning process, but that's a separate question.
But there was an access before, and now it's gone.
Yeah, but I think, well, that's a separate, I don't think we can address that at this meeting. We need to look at the history, but maybe a public right of way, that's a different story. Councillor Crumley.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, if the lady is correct, and there was an access way, and I remember this development, and surely every development will have an access to the rear so that you can bring your bins from the rear to the front of the property. Can we mention this as a specific example to the council to say what's happened here? We're told there's no provision for bringing bins to the front. Who's right? Who's right?
I think, given that this will be addressed to the Environment Department in the council, can I suggest, I think before we do that, I'll take a look at the history, the planning history, to find out if the obstruction was permitted or not.
There is access to the other end of that long terrace, but whether it goes all the way through, I don't know.
Satellite photos. Anyway, so so we'll take a look at that. I think if we keep this letter to addressing the environment issues, and we can always come back to that under matters arising from the next meeting. I can ask for it to be put in necessary once I've taken a look at the maps.
I think that's helpful, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're proposing there is to write to the Berkshire Council asking them if they have a policy on this and suggest, and if not, that they might wish care to develop one. I can send them a template, which they just have to change the name of the council, and then I'll do that separately. But and also suggesting that they have more prominent information on this in their next or in future. So anyway, when they communicate in paper, when they document or tag the residents.
Excellent.
Thank you. So I need to propose. I propose that.
Seconded.
With second those in favour. Thank you. That's agreed. We'll do that, and you'll be able to follow the progress of that. It will be reported under matters arising, or possibly if we get the formal letter back up to on the agenda. But I'm sure that the clerk will be able to inform you if there's a specific item.
Chairman, in any correspondence to West Barnes, could we use the word urgent? Because I don't know how busy they are down there and short-staffed, but could we just use the word urgent matter so we get a response sometime? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much and thank you for your interest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your,
We'll see what we can do.
Stay safe.
Yes. Don't run over the cycles.
I'm assuming that we do have contact information for you. If you're not, let the office know so that we can let you know when we get a response. That will be recent news.
That's the new.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very important.
Writes down.
I'm going, is that?
Yes. Bye-bye then. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. So we then turn back to agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting.
Oh, proposed,
Okay, so the
30th of August, yes.
Those in favour, I think we got confused as to who was seconding and who was in favour, but everyone raised their hand up.
Entirely, yes.
Agreed. That was the minutes of the meeting, and then we have to adopt the minutes of the working party, which was, if you recall,
Proposed,
because of
I was there, so.
those in favour. Three those, thank you. Those are agreed. Matters arising from the previous meeting. I think that the regular items are on the agenda for this meeting as well. So we move on to agenda item 5. It's the appropriate countryside designation specification. And the history of this was that we learned through an item, I think it was in Penny Post, that a contract had been let for this. And I think we asked the engagement officer, West Berkshire engagement officer for it, but it hasn't materialised. But I've obtained it under previous information, and it's here for receive and consider. So this is the specification for another study for what's called a green wedge gap and belt study. And this refers to 3 different techniques to accommodate growth in the community and also to how you link or separate adjacent communities. So the key point here is that the study was due to be completed. The final report was due to be delivered on the 10th of October. I.e. yesterday, and it will be very interesting to see that. I was also interested to read in this that is it yes, paragraph 4.6. No. Something that refers to an extra document. Oh yes, 4.2. It says, in addition, a landscape sensitivity and capacity assessment has been undertaken for this site at North East Thatcham. This has not been published online, but can be made available to the successful tender. It's a finished report. I think that I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be made available to the town council, as it specifically relates, as far as I can tell, to the town. So could I suggest that we ask the deputy clerk to write once again to a different department of the town, of the West Berkshire Council, councillor Lister.
Jeremy, it does say the high level, you're going to 4.2 here.
Yes.
Most point. It does say in brackets the Thatcham strategic.
No, I've
growth.
read the second part of the sentence. The second sentence.
Oh, sorry, in addition, the landscape sensitivity
Yeah.
and capacity assessment has been undertaken to side. Yes, I agree with that. That's not be,
Yes,
that would be helpful for us to be aware of.
yes.
And only right that we should be aware of.
And of course, it's disappointing that this study has been completed without any engagement with the town council.
Unbelievable. Or perhaps it's not unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying, I mean, what is this about? So all this management speak, is it just identifying the green spaces between Newbury and Thatcham, what's appropriate and what isn't? Is that?
Well, it's difficult to know, but there are many different things that it could be, some of which are desirable and some of which are very undesirable. It's quite be nice to see. And it's difficult to tell from the written specification which direction that would go. But it will affect, I think, quite substantially the assessment of particularly alternative sites to
Right.
the North East Thatcham if they come forward. And it might also affect the design of North East Thatcham if that is approved. And of course, we've also seen directly mentioned, I think it was in the same press release that they were reconsidering the number of houses in that in the local plan there, and this might relates to how the layout is designed. But effectively, the previous plan was just sort of monolithic extension on one corner, and this is alternative approaches to try. It's one of the things is to try to maintain some sort of greenness closer to the centre of the community. That's what the idea of the green wedge is, that rather than having a complete community being completely surrounded on one side by new houses, that you leave green corridors into the town centre. And of course, you have a green corridor into the town centre, heading north from the old Blue Coat School. You can pretty much walk on green public footpath in quite a way away from the road, all the way out to the outskirts. So I don't think there's much we can say, but there's much we know. But what I would suggest here, firstly, express disappointment that we haven't had engagement on this. And secondly, to ask through the engagement officer if we can receive both the final report for this study and that additional one, the landscape sensitivity and capacity assessment, which is referenced from the specification.
The second item you mentioned, has that been concluded? Do we know?
It says so here that it's an interesting report.
Right.
Had been undertaken. The study had been undertaken.
Right, and the one you said was going to be delivered today or yesterday on the 10th. You know that for a fact that it has been.
I don't know, but I'm just saying from the specification that was the commitment, that was the requirement of the council. So on past performance, I'm not hopeful. But given that it says that it should have been, then we can alter it. And then they have to say if it's not available.
Chairman, I don't know what the right word is to say apart from flabbergasted, but surely are we not a consultee in matters as a town council?
Well, technically speaking, I think we're only legally obliged to be a consultee when the Regulation 19 consultation starts. And at that point, we will receive about, if the Regulation and 18 is only to go well, we'll receive about 2,000 pages of documentation, about half of which will be new.
Yes.
And it appears that it's being kept back to give it to the Christmas present, beginning of December.
To read over Christmas?
Yes, exactly.
When people are on holiday and thinking about other things. Very convenient.
So anyway, so my proposal is that we request through the engagement officer that if we can be provided with those two reports.
I just can say, and just to acknowledge your work in actually obtaining some of this information is very much appreciated. You know, we're having to rely on the freedom of information requests to obtain material that is being shared with people outside of Newbury and Thatcham, where this is actually of interest to the town council. It's just disappointing, even with an engagement officer, that we're not being made aware of some of these. Also, just to note that personally, I'm a little bit unclear about what the outcome of this work is. The outcome of the work, the requirements and specification, is to set out the methodology for a study and seeks to identify the most appropriate spatial planning approach, such as green wedge, gap, or belt. So it's sets out a methodology, which I kind of would have thought that would have been the job of the officers.
I think, well, yeah.
So it's just odd that they don't know what the difference is between the green wedge or the green gap or the green belters, and that they're having to procure work to tell them that.
I think what they're reading it through, I think what they mean is that they would like advice on which one is most appropriate for this particular situation. But as you say,
that's what I'd have thought somebody in a skilled role would have been able to do.
Well, perhaps they want somebody else to be able to point the finger at when.
Yes, well, it was pear-shaped, yeah.
Well, maybe.
Okay, so Councillor Crumbly.
I agree with, I think, where we're heading. writing to request they demand a copy of the this report, bear in mind it affects us, all of us, so considerably. If we write, I hope we are, can we have a follow-up system perhaps for it to be an agenda item at our next meeting?
It'll be 3 matters arising in any case, so we'll get an update, and if we get the document, that will be.
Give me matters arising and sometimes, you know,
Yeah, we'll make sure, we'll have an update, so can we include an update on these two, on that request as a specific.
I mean, 3 weeks is 3 weeks is long enough for them to say whether they're going to provide a report.
Thank you.
So I propose that to have a seconder.
Yes.
Those in favour. Thank you. That was unanimous as well. So we then get to agenda item 6, highway statement and declaration, which have been circulated in advance of the meeting. So for those of you who are not familiar with this is a notification that the landowner sends to the West Berkshire Council in this case, informing them that effectively the land is not to be dedicated as a public right of way. And therefore, West Berkshire Council received that and filed it and had no say over it. We're informed as a matter of courtesy, but we can't influence, well, West Berkshire Council can't do anything, we can't do anything either. So I just propose that we note this. And there are many of these surrounding Thatcham already.
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank you.
So can I request a bit of explanation? The landowner deposits this with the council, and we're saying that nobody can do anything about it. It seems to be made to be confirming that there are certain rights of way over.
So the point is that it doesn't affect any existing rights of way,
No,
but it prevents people from claiming a new right of way on the basis of uninterrupted use. It's you can, if you want to claim a new right of way, the landowner has to demonstrate an interruption, and they can either do it by evidence or by this declaration.
okay, I've got the point. Thank you.
So that I think is then noted.
Yep.
Proposed base station upgrade, Benham Hill.
Sounds quite interesting, doesn't it? Going off to the moon, are we?
So Chair, should I just stay here and shut up? Or
I think that, well, there's no, you have no direct interest in, do you?
No.
I don't think this is going to affect your employment.
Shares.
So
And it may increase your phone.
So, I mean, no, in that sense, kind of engage in the
I think
discussion.
so. I've been having a good engagement discussion.
Looks like we're not supposed.
Yes, yeah. So this is, we have a letter, do we have a plan? So I think there's actually the elevation is probably the most useful one. So there's a lot of information about the existing site. This is the one at the corner of Hennickworthy, adjacent to the garden centre. If you look at that plan there, you will see that you need to look at the new plan, I think. Right, so if you go back to the old plan, you will see that there is I wasn't sure if the new plan showed the old. So what you see there is a series of cabinets and a mast. The mast is the round item. And if you scroll to the next plan, you will see that the existing cabinets are removed and new cabinets were installed together with a new mast further towards the centre of Thatcham.
Where's the mark?
There's not circular thing on the right hand side.
That's what I thought.
So if we go down to the next one, that is the elevation of the existing one. The taller item is the existing mast, and the shorter pole is the lamp post. And then if we go to the next one, you'll see that the new mast is taller, and the cabinet is slightly bigger, but you also notice that the mast is in fact higher than the trees.
Yes.
In fact, there's one tree which is almost as high, but basically most of the trees surrounding it. This is important for the colour, that's why I'm mentioning it. So that is the proposal. Though the covering letter doesn't say, I think it was the intention of the application that this would come on. This is a pre-application request for information.
Yes.
So they don't discuss the planning conditions, but reading between the lines and looking at the height of the mast, this is intended to be permitted development. In other words, the council would only have particular grounds for objecting. I would just note that the height for permitted development at the moment is 20 metres, and this mark is about 20.1 metres. because they put a little thing called what's it called, a GPS module on top of it. So
I thought, I read somewhere it was 18 metres, or is that the bulky bit? The wire.
The development's now 20, it keeps on changing. It's 2016, it changed. There is, by the way,
The height of the proposed
so
mast, I thought it was 18 when I read
you've
it.
got the centre line of the bottom of the antenna is 18.9. We have two sets of antennas here. The top line there is about 20 metres above ground level. So, interesting point that I did some research. I'm not convinced that this is on highway plan. Because the
Map of Scotland, did you check that out?
in fact, yes. So the point here is that because the roundabout is a recent construction, prior to the construction of the roundabout, the fence for the old agricultural field was in fact, this would have been inside the old agricultural field.
Right.
So it depends on what the for the various bits of the land, whether that's grass beside the footway, it's actually part of the highway or not. But I think that's a bit of a legalistic point. I think the key question is, at this point, what do we want to respond to the applicant, which is on behalf of Vodafone. Now, my suggestion, we've had previous discussions in relation to the mast at the telephone exchange, and given that basically from most directions it will be visible against the sky, that we should request it should be painted grey rather than green. This application doesn't mention the colour, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
The question is, do we want to say anything else, given that if we say we object to it, then we'll say it's into development?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Normally I'd expect a mast like this to blend in as far as possible with the surrounding trees, and therefore be as tall as the tallest item, but not sticking up vertically on top, as it appears to be here. When I was looking at these papers this afternoon, I'm afraid I assumed that was to be the case. Do you have any figures for the height of the trees that appear to be in the background?
The one tree on the left is shown as being 16 metres high, and most of the others, the ones behind the lamppost are 10 metres high, and the ones to the right are much less than that. And what I'm saying is that from most directions, you will, in fact, even because you're looking up at it, the top of the mark will be above the tree line.
We say the top of the mast. I mean, if there's a wand, a spire, or something that's very thin on top that appears from that drawing, then I'd be prepared to ignore that as you wouldn't see it. But obviously, there's a bulk protuberance right on the top. In my view, if we're going to be asked to comment, I'd say I wanted that not to exceed the height of the surrounding trees or tree.
No, they'll say it's a development. So I think the point is there's no point in trying to argue against the developer. It's an interesting. Can I ask Councillor Lister who might want to make an observation here?
Yeah, so if I can make an observation, and clearly if it's implemented development, then we'll need to follow whatever guidance that is. But the reason why, whilst it might be a bit unsightly, the reason why it's desirable to have the antenna above the trees is because the nature of the radio waves, which is called radio propagation, the way it spreads,
Uninterrupted.
it needs to be uninterrupted. And if there's a tree in the way, clearly it's going to be interrupted. It will be impacted seasonally as well. And the consequence of that, unfortunately, is if you have smaller sites which are interrupted by trees, you end up with more of them. So having fewer sites which are a little bit higher is in everybody's interest, really. You know, it really is in everybody's interest because they're in good, better locations. It's still reasonably well shielded, this site. It is against the trees, but having that extra bit of height clears the foliage, it clears the top of the trees. And also, in addition to that, it gets over the rooftops of surrounding buildings, which means that the signal can go further. Otherwise, it just gets blocked by nearby buildings.
Yeah. So
So that's the reason why you want the sites to be that bit taller.
sure.
It's perfectly sensible. And if we can just comment on the colour, often the little rectangle at the top there, that's actually the antenna part, that's the radiating element. They're normally white. So if there's a colour discussion to be had, you probably want that to be the same colour as the antennas, otherwise you'll have a grey pole with white antennas on. maybe it's better if
Or
the,
white, pale grey probably.
yeah, maybe it's better a paler colours, because otherwise it's just going to make the antenna stand out.
Sure.
Councillor Woodhams.
Yeah, I think the initial thoughts are, oh my gosh, it's going to intrude and everybody's going to be seeing and it's going to get in the way and so on. But in fact, there is not quite as high as this. If you drive up Heath Lane on the left-hand side by the mini roundabout, there's a similar set of cabinets, etc., etc. And you see it once and then you ignore it there because you're looking where you're going if you're driving a car, hopefully. And I'm sure pedestrians and cyclists will look up and, my goodness, but then it's there, done and dusted. It doesn't intrude into anybody's lifestyle. And I would support it. It's necessary, obviously.
So what I would suggest then is that we respond saying that because in practice it isn't, it is above the tree line from most directions of view, and we therefore suggest that the mast is coloured to match the antennas or be slightly darker.
White.
Well, I'm not, the white might be glaring, but I think something lightish rather than a leaf green, which was one alternative.
Well, if the top is white,
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
But the actual antenna, which is that rectangle at the top,
Yes, it's white.
there's two sets, they'll probably be white.
Yeah.
It's not a brilliant white, but yes.
So you don't want
Yeah.
the first bit
Yeah.
grey and then the
So
second
what we're
bit
saying
white.
is we would like the colour of the mast to complement to match or to be similar to the antennas that are mounted on it.
Which is white, yes.
Well, we don't know for certain, but
Okay.
in practice, knowing the Comscope catalogue as I do.
Yeah, I don't think they have dark green
No.
antennas.
No.
You haven't got a
So,
cover.
is that just in this cloud technology today?
Uh,
Is white?
Cloud technology is referring to a completely different aspect of telecommunications, I'm afraid.
Not dated 1847, that's amazing.
Okay.
So if it requires a proposal,
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to do that.
Thank you. And I'm going to second that. Do you want to agree to that, or are you abstaining or objecting? So we have 3 in favour and 1 abstaining on grounds of interest. So if you can write that.
Very good, sir.
Probably be very relieved compared to the responses they get from on other masks. Okay, Robertson planning inquiry. So, I can summarise along the story briefly. As you know, the previous meeting that the appeal has been made. I attended, and Thatcham Town Council is what's called the All Six Parties. I attended a case management conference with the 2 main parties, the council and the appellant, at the beginning of the 1st of September, where the inspector suggested that, the other thing to say is that the appellant had also submitted amended plans. They in fact did so initially during the application process, but too late for the council to consider them because they arrived after the agenda had been circulated. So the inspector felt that it was desirable to conclude the process if possible, and therefore that the amended plans and additional documentation be considered as part of the inquiry, which is in December. And the mechanism to do that is what's called a Wheatcroft consultation, after the case law under which it was established, where the consultation is just on the amendment of the new material rather than on the whole thing. And one benefit of that is that all the original representations are carried forward. Whereas if there had been a new application carried forward, then people would have had to resubmitted those representations. So that took quite a long time to set up, and the documents for that consultation appeared on the council's website late on Friday, and the council received full notification today. Today. And that comprises the amended plan, so-called amended plan that you've got copies of, together with, I think, 7 additional studies. So we have a highway study addressing largely the what I would call a parking place, but they call a lay-by. There's a drainage study, there's a landscape study, and 3 or 4 ecological studies on different species and things. Totaling, I guess, about 150 pages of documentation. So, and the deadline for the submissions on that is 28th of October. And I believe that all the people who submitted representations will have been individually notified of that. But of course, because of the whole raft of new material, there may be people who didn't wish to get representations on the initial plan who wouldn't do so now, and they can. What I'll do, just briefly outline the different, in addition to that additional information, I've got a paper copy of the plan because it's almost impossible to see on the screen. Yeah, so it's going to outline the key differences so you're aware of them and you're ready to you can send information to me and be prepared for that meeting, the next meeting on the 20th.
I have a preliminary question because what's the point of this? Does it work for the advantage of the appellant? And if so, did the West Berkshire Council not seek to resist their application? This sounds to me like a ploy, lodge an appeal and then buying in some amended plans and more information so as to muddy the waters, so to make it more likely your application is going to succeed.
As I've been party to, firstly because I've been party to emails under privilege, and secondly because I don't think it's appropriate, I can't comment in this meeting on the intentions of the appellant and the timing. If you look at the documents, they've been around for a long time. Some of them go back to earlier this year. But the intention of the inspector is that the inquiry will reach a clear conclusion, that there won't be a new application hanging over which muddies the water of the inquiry and possibly carries the decision beyond it. So that, I think, is the intention of the inspector, which is laudable.
Good.
And but I'll just point out the main elements of this. So the original application had seven sites, each with a mobile home, day room, and a touring caravan. And there was an area, a grass area, which was described, I think, as for a play area for children. What you have here, you will see at the left, that rather odd round sort of shape of rounded corners is a sustainable drainage scheme, and the swale that runs along the north of the site. The layout of each site has changed so that the mobile homes are far closer to the boundary. And as you know, the boundary is, the site is elevated with a bank down to the road, so these will be quite prominent. And the day room is being moved as well, and site is now gravel, whereas before there was grass areas. So the layout is quite different. I think the plan of the day room has been carried forward. The sustainable drainage scheme is quite new. And it seems to differ from the technical study which has been submitted as part of the application. So one of my tasks will be to investigate whether this drainage scheme fulfills the requirements of that study. And then we've got this question of the lay-by and in addition 4 ecological reports, which I would suggest that we have a lower priority about. I don't think that was our main concern before, but if that's another member wishes to look at the sentence I'm reading them, I'll be happy, but I will be focusing on those other documents. So we've had to arrange because of the deadline for this consultation, and there's also a similar deadline for the revised statement of case that we submitted before, and frankly, it will be almost completely new based on the new material. We will need to hold an extraordinary meeting of Planning and Highways on the 25th of October, which is 2 weeks' time. By which time, and preferably 3 days before, 3 clear days before that, I will have a revised statement of case for consideration by that meeting. So it took them 2 months to set up the thing, and then we've got effectively 10 days to progress it. The deadline, by the way, I think because of the date of the inquiry, that deadline is fairly fixed in terms of the guidance for the inspector.
So Chair, but appreciate you don't want to go into details here, not be the purpose of the meeting on the 21st. Again, just an observation, because this is a lane I use on a regular basis when I go for my afternoon walk when I'm working from home. And actually going up there just yesterday, in fact, it would have been. There was a van that came out of the site, driving relatively quickly as it went round the corner, causing me to sort of jump to the side. So there is an issue to do with the visibility and the width of the lane there. It's really quite difficult as an individual, as a pedestrian using that lane, which is how it's sort of intended to be used broadly as active travel.
I don't think we need to look at the highway study, but that's really addressing vehicles passing. I don't think it addressed pedestrians.
Sure, but you mentioned the passing by a lay-by.
Yeah, a passing, but it's described in the report as a lay-by, which I think is where people park. And it should be described as a passing place, which is where people pull in but don't park.
Yeah. And do you know where it is on that?
If you look at the paper copy, there is a separate report you can find online. You can just see it on the small print roughly on the boundary between the second and third from the right. Very, very faint. I'll point it out to you after the meeting.
Right.
It's marked on the plan. That is indicative because that is the highways approval.
Yeah,
It may not even be accurate because we need to look at that, the highways technical note for the recommendation.
Let's see how it goes there, but okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Councillor Cromwell.
Madam Chairman, what's the dark outline there?
That's the existing table. That is outside. Another point about this is that the red line area is not shown on this, so we don't know the boundary. But that is that is the existing building which is outside the red line area from the previous development, previous application.
Because there's a red dotted line on my copy. Is that not the red line?
The red line is the fence, which is in fact not the boundary at the north side, I think.
You must have liaised with West Berkshire Council, whoever. What's their view of they seem to be mainly letting the appellant buying all this new stuff that seems very suspicious. Are they not fighting and resisting it?
I think they took the advice of the inspector. So and of course I've only been in attendance with them on that one occasion. So we've exchanged emails, all of which have been copied into the appellant. And as we're separate parties, I don't really want to take up with them what they're
All right, who's not dealing with them?
I can't remember offhand, but you can find that on the. I think I need to check. I don't want to.
It seems to me we should be going to see them to make sure that we've got a coherent policy, the same policy as them, because I just feel that manoeuvres like this may become more and more common with.
I can only comment on this application, not how frequently it occurs, but obviously they have submitted a statement of case, which was their views on the application. And I assume, given the magnitude of the changes, they'll be submitting a revised.
All right, so we've got a meeting on the 25th when you're going to be pulling the threads together to.
I will be presenting a document to for approval. In principle, there are two documents because they're the representations to the appeal and the statement of case. But I've had it clarified that in practice we only need one of them because they will both end up in the inspector with the inspector for the inquiry. So we'll probably submit a very brief representation just stating our key bullet points and saying that the details are in the statement of case. But that's to be, I need to do that. But really, I've only known the details since Friday. I know there's been discussions over 2 months, but it's only then, last Friday, that I knew for certain what the documents were that were part of the.
Can I just leap on ahead a moment? Item 10.3, land off Lawrence's Lane. Is that linked in any way to this application?
Not. And it's only linked because they're both off different ends of Lawrence's Lane. It's the opposite end. We'll come to that.
The opposite end. So it's not.
It's not. It's got no planning. It's a different party. It's a different.
But I thought.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we'll come back on to that. So that is, I think, at the moment, really just need to note the update and note the plan that you've received, and to draw your attention to the many voluminous documents on the West Berkshire Council website. I'd be happy to give you the link should you wish to read them,
You're very kind.
but you'll probably won't. Leave it to me.
Entirely.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
We have an expert on reptiles. An expert on reptiles.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. So I propose to note that. Do we have a second to note that? We vote in favour of vote. Thank you. We've dealt with agenda item 9. We move on to agenda item 10, planning application, which is normally the highlight of the meeting.
Yeah, what we're supposed to be doing.
So we have 3. Thankfully, we only have 3 today. So, planning application number 1.
Right, so this is this is an application for the demolition of existing porta cabins and the construction of a 4-bay workshop to include a vehicle testing lane and a body shop. The proposed building will include offices, meeting rooms and facilities associated with the existing rental and service site. It is also proposed to construct a concrete vehicle check area adjacent to the proposed building and renewal of permission difference previously granted in 2016. So there was a previous application in 2016 approved in 2017 for exactly the same, apart from it had a 3-bay workshop at the time. Then earlier this year, they applied for a certificate of lawful development, which that was refused. They were to provide evidence that they'd started the construction, and it was felt that the time had lapsed for the 3-year period, and therefore that was refused. So the applicant has now decided that because of this different position between the applicant and the local authority, and to expedite the process, they are going to now apply for a new application rather than modular appeal. So
Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions. I presume that's the railway to the north of the site.
Left-hand side is a level crossing.
That look right, see, right, okay, fine.
Left-hand
We
side.
also know
The bottom right is the bridge over the canal.
Yeah, I know it well. I know it well since I've been there. The script says at the bottom, renewal of permission reference such and such in 16. So for the reasons given, this is simply a repeat of a request again to the for permission to replicate what has happened before.
Yeah.
If that is the case, then I propose no objection.
I also note that it's not at all close to any residential property. There are a couple on the opposite side of the
There's a cottage on the other side of the canal. Is there?
they're just further along. So it's
Contained.
Yeah.
A second, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Those in favour of no objection, thank you very much. I have to say that anything that they put there can't really be more ugly than what they're.
Exactly. Keep it all on one side.
Okay.
So moving on to
Retrospective.
the next one. So this is 20 Oak Tree Road. The application is for part retrospective 2-storey side extension following the demolition of an existing garage and a 1-storey front and rear extensions. So there was a previous application for the single story extensions. It wasn't considered by committee because it didn't come up on reference. So it looks like what they've done is they've started the single story extensions and they have an outline of the mission for a second story.
Could you,
I believe they've already started the single story.
could you outline the plot? Because it's difficult to see it from here, sorry.
So it's this plot here.
Oh, was that one, is it?
Yeah. I'll show it. So it's this here. So this big. Show you the photos. Please change from. So that's the roof plan, and we're proposing 3 parking spaces in the front. Existing elevations.
So the existing garage, which is shown on this diagram, is now gone.
It's completed, but
It says following the demolition of existing garage, single story front and rear extension.
originally it was going to be a garage conversion.
Oh, I see.
First.
That's the first on left there, proposed front.
So this is the proposed front elevation, so rid of the garage. And brought this out.
Nice bit of subsidiarity of the serving.
I'll throw in the end of it.
Well, thank goodness for that.
The elevation, yeah. Look at the, this was the existing ground floor plan, the garage to the side. And then the previously approved single story extension was around here to the rear. And now they're looking for art retrospective for the second
Could,
story.
Chairman, could we go back to the photograph, just to get an idea of the proximity of the adjacent property?
That's the important one, if I can just comment, because I think the garage there goes right up to the fence.
Yes.
So there's no access to the rear of the property. And if they're talking about putting 3 car park spaces in the front, there's not going to be an awful lot of space for garbage bins and the rest. So back to what we discussed this morning.
I think the problem is that they've already got planning permission for the ground floor part of it.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so somebody.
Which was a garage conversion,
unless they were planning to carry the bins over the flat roof of
the garage.
first floor, the 1 floor extension.
Well, they carry it through the garage.
No, but I'm saying that the ground floor part of the extension has already received planning permission approval
Did that get through town council?
because it was a single story, so it didn't go.
We didn't review that.
Yeah.
Oh, that might be something we need to amend.
Wheelie bins can go in the front garden anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they can do, but they're talking about putting 3 car park spaces.
Yeah, so can we go back to the
So, I mean, you're right, it could just stay in the front.
Let me see what it's like on the front.
There's not a lot of space there, right? This is part of the property.
Goes up to the heart of the boundary.
Well, there was that space to the right of the porch, so that was the only place you could put things.
Oh, can I see the house from the front as proposed? And then from the rear?
So that's we wanted to see the parking and then
So you've got space for a car on the right. Like cars.
I'm concerned that effectively one parking space uses the other two, whether therefore they'll be used.
Sorry, say again?
The car parking space to the left prevents people from then leaving the other two spaces.
Yeah, Chair, are they proposing to knock down that wall then?
No, they're not. The point is that they're proposing to have those three spaces. If you look at what's on the screen,
Yeah, the
On
people.
the wall,
they're
right?
proposing to put two extra spaces sideways, but because of the layout, then there will be the first car will have to be moved to allow the other two to leave. I feel on-street parking might occur.
Yeah, I can't.
All this is poor planning, isn't it? If they're proposing just what you said to retain the wall, I feel that
Yeah.
that's coming on.
So I think that if I was if I was to see the whole thing from scratch, I would be very reluctant, but given that the ground floor element of it has already received planning permission, it is difficult to.
Chair,
Yes.
I mean, unfortunately, that doesn't come to the town council to review, so we
Yeah.
haven't made a position on that.
Yeah.
So I think we should just review this.
Yeah.
I appreciate that applications be made, but I think from a town council perspective, we can comment on this as if it's a new application.
Well, that's an interesting question. We don't know what has been. You said that. Can you go back to the plan of what's been approved?
Those elevations obviously haven't been approved, so I don't have the previous one
Okay.
up to hand.
Do you have the previous plan?
But I have the. So. This was what it originally was,
Yes.
and I believe, I did double check against the previous application. This is what previously
Yes.
there.
That's the ground floor.
So,
What
I think,
previously agreed, and then this.
It also doesn't increase, well, apart from multi-use space can cover a multitude of sins, of course, if they become a bedroom. In fact, the multi-use space seems to have a shower room.
So it's a larger footprint as well, it's going forwards.
In fact, it's going to the fourth bedroom, isn't it? Can you go, so what I would suggest, given the constraints we're under, that we should express concern about the parking space, the third parking space, which is required as a result of the extra bedroom. Because it's not a genuine parking space, because it's only accessible, two of the spaces are only accessible by the third car going out onto the road.
Yeah. And also,
Yeah,
if this had come to us originally, I think we'd have objected because of the limited access to the back of the garden. So what they're proposing here, the other reason why this extension would be appropriate is because if those cars were in that smaller space now, there wouldn't be space for wheelie bins and rubbish bins.
But they could knock down the wall, put in a drop curb and put three cars across the front, couldn't they?
yeah, they could.
I could let them apply for it then.
Yeah, so I think
It's that-
so I think the point is that, so we'd say, I presume we submitted something, so no comment because of policy. So,
Off-road parking be
so
provided.
if we say that, have we seen, had the application come forward in its entirety, we would have objected to the complete proposal because of overdevelopment and lack of access. Given that it has been, the ground floor has already been approved, we object to the first floor on the grounds that the additional parking spaces are not accessible because the one car will obstruct the other two spaces, and therefore, in effect, they're not proper spaces. They won't be used. You find the appropriate wording for that.
But you, alternatively, could recommend that the brick wall was knocked down.
That's their job to. I think the moment, I'm trying to find reasons to object, so.
Are you really?
I think I got the feeling that people, had they seen the whole proposal, they would have objected. And therefore trying to find a reason to object to the extension to the first floor.
You could raise no objection subject to.
We could, but I've got the feeling that councillor Lister was feeling that we would have objected to the whole thing. So,
Councillor Richard is the same, we need to object to this, I
So-
think. Because of the parking issues you
Yeah.
mentioned about not removing the front wall
Yeah.
and the lack of access to the rear for wheelie bins. I suggest we frame that as an objection.
so what I'm saying is
not-
that, the first thing to say that had we seen the entire development, we would have objected to it.
But we're objecting.
But now we're now objecting now, and the grounds for the objection to this particular application
Ah,
is overdevelopment and the lack of adequate parking, because although there's
and lack of rear access.
that's not to do with the current application, because the river access has already been. So we're objecting, we would have objected to the previous application and the lack of river access. So we state that.
So I make a proposal that whatever you said is an objection.
Yes,
And
and
then I just support that.
we now object to this application on the grounds of overdevelopment and inadequate parking because the spaces are not accessible.
So are we objecting?
Yes, we're objecting, yes.
Right, I'll second and object.
Thank you. All in favour, that was unanimous with that wording, if you've got that. It's on the recording anyway, so. Okay, so third and final, land off the opposite end of the line to play. So this is the ridge. You will see the blue area at the top is in fact the land that is currently had recently received approval for 5 houses.
Halfway through being built.
Yeah. And this is, I think, the application. This application has been made by the builder of those houses. So obviously you've got the whole site. So it is for the area in red, which is
I see something that area.
yeah. So you have at the bottom of it is the footpath, public footpath that goes up steps. Have you got the? Did you get those two Google Street views? So that is the footpath, if you remember that.
Yeah.
And it's the field to the right, and this is the gate, which is, I believe it's the gate. There are several gates, but this is the one that's not hidden by buried in the hedge, through which you would access the field, open mud. So given that the actual site is in Colthrop parish, and but Lawrence's Lane is on the boundary for Thatcham parish. I sent by email earlier today a number of suggestions for, firstly, that we make no objection, but subject to 3 conditions.
So can I just mention there was one objection?
Okay, do you know
Um,
on what basis?
Object to develop the track across the agricultural land is not required as there is access to the site from the ridge.
I don't think there is. If you look at the map, I don't think there is access. So that if you go back to the red and blue line area, there is if those houses are built, then there is no access from the ridge.
There's access from that lane.
There's access from the lane, and that one.
There is access from that lane to the left hand side. That's probably the landowner.
There is the extension of the footpath to the left, and I think that's pretty narrow where it passes the mark.
That's it, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Anyway, there's nowhere, I don't think there's anywhere to get vehicles onto site. So I suggested three conditions, which
So can you just I just want to see the south end of of that. So where's that relative to Farmhouse? It's just north of the.
yes, so the farm is that road off to the bottom of the.
Yeah, so if you haven't been up there recently, that's where the Bollards are, which closes off the lane from the north side.
So there you've got the houses under construction. And the more detailed map with the access points.
So it's the rest of the land south of those homes.
Yeah,
South of the homes and north of the footpath, but not quite Okay, all the way west.
At the moment, it's usually used for sheep grazing.
It's quite steep sloping, isn't it?
It is on the south side of it.
And
Not as steep as the North Newbury development, but anyway, so what I suggested was that we.
Yeah, I was going to propose no objection, Chair.
I'm going to read out what my proposal for the conditions. So the first one is that because there is no possibility of parking on Lawrence's Lane and it's muddy, I suggest that one condition is that an area of hard standing is provided onto and near the entrance to the field, sufficient to allow vehicles to park, turn and exit onto the lane in the forward direction. So that they do actually don't attempt to park on the road. Second one, that the public footpath is not to be used for private access by horses into the paddocks because they'll chew it up because it's so narrow.
Yeah.
And the third one, which is more of a comment, then, is that for the safety of horse riding from the site, the experimental TRO on Lawrence's Lane should be made permanent. We might not get unanimity on that one. Stop through traffic, basically.
So just repeat that.
For the safety of horse riders riding from the site, because the exit is onto Lawrence's Lane,
Oh, I see. Okay.
the experimental TRO on Lawrence's Lane should be made permanent.
Sounds good.
just strikes me that this is simply a part of the that the houses that are being built there already. Will be what paddock land attached to one or more of those properties that are being built, so access for horses and so on will be through that row of houses.
I should say here, perhaps I could declare an interest that I have spoken to the regional, I've exchanged emails with the regional officer for the British Horse Society. So a lot of these paddocks are rented out to people who are not residents. So I think that would be the case here for most of them.
Are being used as paddocks already?
No, I don't know this one, but if, for example, you take the paddocks north of Turnpike Road as an example, there is a shortage of them, and people. That's one of the reasons I was talking about having the vehicle up the hard standing vehicles, because it's likely that the majority of these, if not all of them, would be for people who are not living in the 5 houses to the north.
Okay.
If they were, then I think that they would probably, the land would have been sold with them, so that it would have been applied for by the houses.
Yeah. Can I just clarify?
Yeah.
Whoever uses that bit of land, if it's used for a paddock, it's inconvenient with that public footpath going through the middle.
And public footpath on the south side. If you go back
in the middle.
No, there is a private track going through the middle, but what you see there, half UM is the footpath.
Oh, apologies. I thought but there was the public footpath. That's not. That's just existing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine then.
So I reread those 3 conditions then.
Yeah.
An area of hard standing is provided onto and near the entrance to the field, sufficient to allow vehicles to park, turn and exit onto the lane in the forward direction. Second one is that the public footpath, which is the south of the side, is not to be used for private access by horses into the paddocks. And it's unclear who owns that. The maps are not detailed enough to say whether they're part of this or not. So, and the third one is for the safety of horse riders riding from the site, the experimental TRO on Lawrence's Lane should be made permanent.
That's a proposal. I'm happy to second it.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's okay.
Proposed, seconded, and that's unanimous.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. You've got the text out. Right. So then we move on to two more, which we would not normally consider single story extent for representation.
Only one representation on the first one, but that was in support of.
Okay, I think we don't need to that doesn't need to affect our decision. So thank you. So we will just note those 2.
Proposed noted.
We need to, but anyway, we've noted them.
Yep.
Planning matters, agenda item 11. Planning matters since the publication of the agenda.
Yes, one item, which I think I've added to the back of the pack. This is similar to the earlier item. Has been received from a company Harts Hill Farm, who are acting on behalf of MBNL.
We're acting on behalf of Great.
On behalf of 3 and 3E. It is a purchase of contacting us as to consult with us on our views for a proposal both before planning. So I'm to do any feedback, filing information. Phase of the.
So this is the 18 metres mark that you were talking about.
Yeah, so the proposal relates to the installation of a new 18-metre monopole, supporting 6 sanitary with a wraparound equipment cabinet. This is by Colthrop Lane. So, yeah.
Can I get proposed that we make the same comment about the colour of the mark that we made previously?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further comments that we wish to make, given that this is actually less prominent than the previous one?
Could I challenge the letter? They say they want to ensure the latest high quality 2G, 3G and 4G
2G, wow.
service provision. Why not 5G?
Yes.
As somebody who works on 6G.
And
Halfway down the page, Chair, if you're looking for that sentence.
yes. Why 3 would want to support 2G in any case if they don't have any spectrum suitable, so they don't at the moment. I think we have a cut and paste letter here, boilerplate letter. Anyway,
It's not been updated for many years.
Yeah.
I'm not serious about it. Sorry, Trudy, I don't think we
Yeah.
need to comment on that. It's
So-
it's an old letter that they recirculated. It's probably a 10-year-old letter. Either that or they're deliberately not putting 5G on there because they don't want to scare people because 5G was a dirty word last year when the COVID pandemic was happening.
anyway, so can I suggest that we make the same response to them about the colour of the mark?
Yes. Happy to second that.
That's agreed unanimously, thank you. Traffic highways, and road and safety matters.
Yes, one thing, I believe.
Yeah.
So we've got Lawrence's name, which was just that, they've now, erected bollards on one
Yeah.
of the lanes at place. To the PRO.
Yes, there's 2 sets of bollards. There's one bollard to the sort of south, the bottom of the hill, which is just above the gypsy site. That access is still existing, and then there's a bollard there which prevents you going further up the hill. And then similarly, if you're coming down the hill from the ridge, there's another set of bollards which are just to the south, or just below the access to the farm. So there's a bit in the middle which is inaccessible by vehicles, but the farm holder has access from the top, and the gypsy site has access from the bottom.
And we received an email today, thank you, included in that.
Yes.
Which was sort of, so this is an experimental traffic regulation order, which means that it's for a period of 6 months and they're seeking comments throughout that period. And we previously agreed that we would submit comments towards the end of that once we built up got the most knowledge about it. I'm saying it. So that was our existing view, was we had it penciled in for December meeting. The deadline is the 19th of January. And we were going to comment in December once we collected the information. Now we've received an email. Do you want to say what the email said?
So, as we're in the middle of a public consultation period for the TRO associated with the closure of Lawrence's Lane to vehicular traffic, I was wondering if yourselves had any comments or observations to make at this stage with regards to how you see it working, stroke meeting its intended purpose.
Who's that from?
That's from
West
Berkshire Highway.
All right, okay. I thought it was an objection.
Yeah, so again, a few other observations. As well as the bollards in place, there's actually also those sensors which go across the road for them to monitor traffic flow. So that's to the south of the single bollard. So that's really just to enable them to monitor traffic flow to the gypsy side. I don't think there probably should be any vehicle movements, but that's in place.
I can tell you that the traffic report for the planning application said that a monitor being put in place by the consultant for the appellant.
Right.
In order to find out how little traffic there was.
Yeah.
And that may still be the same one that's in place, maybe not the West Berkshire one.
That might well be the case. And so there's a sensor there of some sort. The observation though is related to the just above the two bollards which are at the upper side of the hill. So just adjacent to the farm access. So the farmer's clearly got some issues because people are coming down from the ridge, coming across the two bollards, and then having to turn around and go back up to the ridge to get back out again. And the farmer's put a blockage across much of his track with a notice saying, please don't come down, drive down this track, because this is to my house, and the bollards have nothing to do with me. If you've got a complaint, please send your complaint to West Berkshire Council.
Nice one.
So the farmer has clearly got an issue. Although that might just be a temporary issue whilst people come across this, in fairness. Now they've done it once, they're not going to go back down there again, would be my suspicion.
And it takes some time for, I would hope that West Berkshire Council has informed the purveyors of sat-navs, but it takes some time for that to filter through.
Indeed, I was thinking that delivery drivers and so forth, you know, it's quite often used as a shortcut.
So in fact, the email did say that the council had received some objections from residents, local residents. So what I was going to suggest was to respond to that, saying that we are not keeping we are keeping an interest in this.
Yeah.
We intend to respond towards the end, give our council response towards the end of the period. But draw his attention to the planning application and our response to it.
Mm. And again, if I can comment purely as a personal view, I use that path daily. You know, I go for a walk up and down there halfway through the day, and it's such a pleasure being able to walk up there now and walk down and not be worried about something coming, you know, a vehicle coming down and driving into the back of you. It's actually much more pleasurable. And as soon as you pass those bollards and you're back into that little short stretch where something might come down, you sort of always looking over your shoulder.
In fact, when I was searching out, I sent the specific links for those two photographs, and as I looked at Street View up and down there, in fact, the Street View camera has captured very, very well the consequences of meeting walkers and runners on Lawrence's Lane.
In what ways?
Pictures of the vehicle approaching these walkers.
Oh, really?
And then there's one side view of them need to stand by the side, and then but from behind, there's two sets of walkers on that street view. But anyway, so that's my suggestion of how we respond to that. I can do that with you. I don't know who it was sent to. It wasn't sent to us correctly, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll talk offline about who should do the response, but if I suggest that we respond in that way.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, sorry.
So that would be other traffic management, highway road safety matters.
So one other, so Harts Hill Lane.
It's all happening up there.
So we did have notification that it would be closed between the 3rd and the 7th of October, but we've received notification that it's been actually extended until the 12th of October due to delays on site.
So David, have you seen anyone working there?
No, there's nobody working there, but there is indications that they're preparing to work because there's some telegraph wires, cables looped around some of the telegraph poles.
Right, okay.
So it looks like they're ready to do some preparation work. But the bollards now are in the closing off that section of road where they need to do the work, I imagine.
I see that the bollards are there must be a key to remove.
Yeah, it looks like there's a key in the ground,
Yes,
so it can move up and down.
And I did check the traffic regulation order excludes code operators, so they do have permission to go there.
Right.
Anyway, so I think we can note that, and if you could let us know if there was any reason to close the road. If you haven't seen any vehicles, I think it's
No,
Yeah.
I think it is
Yeah.
It's working, you know, as required at the moment because the dwellers are stopping any vehicles. So
They have the key, right? They have the key to it. They haven't had their own.
yeah, I'm saying that the only vehicle that stopped me was one that came out of the gypsy side.
Yeah.
Just came around the corner. At least I shouldn't say that actually on record because I don't know it came from the gypsy side. There's a vehicle that came down from that direction.
Yeah.
But I don't know where it actually comes from.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Right. Okay, so then anything else? No, thank you. So that's 12B. So move on to decision notices.
Has Pound Lane come up yet? Waiting for the, because I think it was refused. It was a retrospective for a brick wall with
Yeah.
timber.
Yeah, that's
I just-
we've seen that, Emma. We have responded to that.
Yes, but I'm waiting to hear what, we'll see what West Berkshire said about it.
I think that we responded quite soon after it came up, so it's probably still.
I think.
Lady. Honestly, and mobility aids as well.
Right.
You see the narrow it.
Right.
It might be obvious.
Right.
Just had to get out of the way for the Google vehicle.
Managing exceptional.
Yes,
So, first of all, it was 14A Broadway, with the consent to display one fascia sign and one projecting sign. Thatcham had no objection, it's been reviewed by West Berkshire Council. The existing signage in the immediate vicinity of the site, whilst exhibiting some variation in style and character, predominantly uses traditional materials and such means of light. Signage incorporates aluminium and internal illumination. The combination of these elements would create a modern signage that would fail to reflect the character and appearance of the conservation area.
agreed.
Bringing harmony to the visual and scene. That's the main one on that one.
But which shop was that? It's on the pizza place.
Is that-
Selling your pizza.
Might have been that, yeah. I don't think we,
It looks like it just adjacent to Bella Vita.
yeah, so, I wouldn't regard, what's traditional to a modern brick building, I would have thought, anyway.
Then there was four fairly close, story extension to the by town council and refusal. That's coming up again.
And the reason for that was
Proposed development would add a further 10 meters of brickwork on the boundary with the neighbouring property to the south. And to Curling Close. Developing brickwork extending along approximately 50% of the boundary. Along the massive brickwork with falls unacceptable detrimental.
visual impact. Visual impact was something that you could charge them for.
Yes, that looks like that. False, under a different application.
Can I suggest that we put that one, we do look at that one next meeting? Right.
This one lands the rear of 123 to 125 Bath Road. Construction of 3 detached bungalows, associated parking. Used again.
But the residents, 123 to 125 Bath Road, are the people who are offering the land for this development, I think they must consider it acceptable. Yeah,
So again,
yeah.
yes, it's the proposal with the road along gardens of 123 and 125.
Which is true,
Because they sold the land to develop it.
this is the, of my common plan, this is the one that I found most bizarre. Anyway, so,
And then This was difference, Bluebell Way, with removal of backdated existing fence and hard chain shrubbery. Was over a new fence to be installed for better security. I think that was.
Yeah, we
Wrapped
did,
around,
yeah.
wasn't it?
Please.
Yes, yeah. Right. Not acceptable because it would represent a substantial building up and organisation of the front of the site in a public location, which is not in keeping with the existing green and open character of the area. The development would result in not only part of the character of the site, but would have significant potential to precipitate wider character harm to the immediate locality through a proliferation of similar proposals, which would be to a detriment of the public's enjoyment of the creating.
Well, we agree with that.
And that was.
So we only have, item 14, report from council appointees to outside bodies. Could I suggest, stepping under this, that we inform them about the amended planning application, amended plans for the Lawrence Lane site, because they include sustainable drainage. And with that, that's agreed that we do that.
Yeah.
And with that, that brings us to the end of our meeting for the allotted hour.
Well done.
So thank you very much. That's been
2 hours.
2 hours. Well, that's we're going to stop the recording.
Yes. I heard that.